Wonderful. So we have all the panelists on the stage now. Let's get it started. So I'm co-founder of Topology. My name is Thomas. I also go by Gyoza on social media, and we have the ZK panel here. Let's give a round of intro.
Hello everyone, I'm Raza, head of growth at Scroll. Basically everything non-engineering. Scroll, for those who don't know, is a L2 ZK rollup launched in 2023 mainnet. Been around for a minute, 3 years I think. Scroll. 10 years in TradFi, 5 years in crypto.
Hey guys, I'm Elias. I'm one of the co-founders of Kakarot. We are, I would call us a proof provider for rollups.
I love the name.
Proof provider?
No, Kakarot.
Ah, yeah. Dragon Ball?
Of course.
And that's it.
Pretty much everything in the Starknet ecosystem is named after some kind of like Dragon Ball Z thing, if I remember correctly. But yeah, Francis, BD at Starkware. I'm kind of the Bitcoin guy, so I'm not exactly sure how I ended up here, but I'll be pushing this one over to my, I guess, chainman in some sense, right? More frequently than not.
Maybe ZK is coming to Bitcoin.
Yeah, maybe.
Awesome. One more question before we start. What was the happiest moment in ETHDenver for you?
I had a really, really, really good French martini yesterday, so that definitely takes the cake.
Oh, that's a good question. I was at Stable Summit, and I think a lot of my assumptions on growth in the space were validated by industry leaders, A16Z, Triton Ventures, Circle. Very bullish on stablecoins.
Yeah, stablecoins are bullish as well. I got to catch up with Danilo, my former co-founder, and that was nice. So events are always cool to catch up with people who live across the world. That was a happy moment.
Well, I want to switch my moment. There's a new protocol going to Scroll, and they came out of our open program. Young, talented kids, and they're out to raise. That was actually that was 100% my most happy zone.
100%. growth cap back on.
That's it.
Beautiful. So now let's get to the first question of the day. So all the panelists here are working either on a layer 2 project or working on top of a layer 2. This idea of layer 2s comes from this layer 2 centric roadmap, an idea of scaling Ethereum. So let's talk about the roadmap first. What does the layer 2 centric roadmap for Ethereum to you? And sort of from this thesis, how are your projects leveraging that idea to scale the blockchain?
I guess just to give a bit of context, Ethereum does 15 TPS, maybe 30 TPS sometimes. So when we say centric roadmap of L2s, it was because we needed to have more transactions per second. And it came as one way, like one of the ways you could have this. And so many teams worked on scaling solutions to today achieve maybe 300, all in all, maybe 500 sometimes, TPS. And the end goal is, of course, like 20,000 TPS. So we're not there yet, but I think this is this kind of like direction that was given. Increase bandwidth, reduce latency, but back in the day for Vitalik.
Yeah, so picking off that, I think increasing bandwidth, I think that what Ethereum did well is accessibility. So at some point, very decentralized, a network all over the world. But then what you saw in some regions, accessibility, yes, but they weren't usable because paying $3, $5, $6, $7 for like interactions is just like not an option. So from another point of view, like scalability meant that, okay, now that we're decentralized and Ethereum is everywhere, how do we make sure that these use cases like Aave, Uniswap, financial access to access to financial railways, to throw a buzzword in there, was still not, let's say, it's like almost like I can see a house but I can't enter it kind of thing. And so from my personal experience, like I remember in 2002, Polygon really took off because it was like, from a developer experience, similar, and obviously it was a side chain, but it was cheaper to interact with. So I think what that means to me is that it is an extension to make Ethereum accessible for people, and then for people like in emerging markets, for instance, where where we also have a huge focus. So it was almost like Ethereum's everywhere. How do we boil the ocean and each L2 has its role to play in that.
I actually have a question. So recently in the Ethereum world, we've seen, I think Vitalik said today, he was like, the OGs sort of need to step down and we need sort of like new crazy ideas. So I wanted to throw one at you guys from the perspective of a Bitcoiner, which you
Let's
probably
go.
won't like. But like crazy idea. Have you ever seen the guy, he has the subway ticket? And those like they chat subway tickets. They do like crazy takes. Okay, this is one of those. But
Oh yeah.
So
What's your hot take?
this is a
Yeah.
real hot take. So Ethereum chops like 99% of scripts on L1 and it essentially just has like opzkp verify, and then you push like all real computation to the layer 2s, and like L1 just becomes essentially a verification mechanism.
Are
Crazy
you asking
idea?
this like, are we in or are we out?
In or out? Yeah. Like the subway ticket, you know?
I mean, some in on the vision, out on the execution, because the roadmap of Ethereum in the next 2 years, it was called the Beam chain. Funny fact, they received a cease and desist from the trademark Beam, so we will now call it something else very soon. But the Beam chain is the way in which we are going to make Ethereum L1 ZK, and with that, actually, you will still be able to produce some blocks on L1. It's just that you will prove them in the same slot that you've produced them, and then other verifiers will verify the ZK proof, which is kind of the same thing. We have a OP ZK verify on Ethereum, but that won't be enough. So I think the roadmap is going towards ZK Ethereum L1 with the Beam chain and Justin Drake, plus all of the L2s becoming ZK rollups, plus every other L1 becoming ZK, and the world becoming this huge kind of archipelago of ZK chains, exchanging data over proof-based interop.
Want to give a hot take? So, yes. But what I also see is, okay, I'll give you a hot take. You want a hot take?
I love hot takes.
All right. Every L2 is a competitor.
To whom?
Each other. But we have a common friend, which is Ethereum. So we are here, like, we came from that philosophy. Like that's definitely for me, like 5 years ago, okay, not that moment. But you could have picked like Solana or Ethereum, basically. Later down, like not 5, maybe 3, 4 years ago. And I think that, yes, I do agree with what Elias, what you said. But what also is happening is that, you see ecosystems growing, and I wonder if one ecosystem will become so big that, the concept
It will
of
change its
I don't
base
think that's a
layer.
hot take. So I don't think that's a hot take at all. Actually, this is something I find super interesting.
Well, 1 second before you
Oh,
say.
yeah, go ahead.
The reason why it's a hot take is because if you have L2 founders on a panel today, it's just like one hugging fest. Outward. Behind closed doors is different, I can tell you. I've been part of different L2s. And so it is actually a hot take because it's kind of like almost like you're a wolf in sheep clothes.
Because we're in denial.
So I think deny is one thing, and then I love the interactions between Mert and Jesse Polak. Like no, like I don't not throwing fade at all, but like
You don't prefer Rushi and Fede?
I like everything Fede says.
I think that when you see there is like Mert just saying like, dude, come out already. We're competitors. Don't like act like it's not the case. And I think that's a mentality switch that definitely needs to happen because it's the case. I see, like, there's many scenarios. There's a multiverse or anything, but I see a scenario where when L2 becomes so huge, like, will it overtake Ethereum?
Capital traditionally, like if you look in TradFi markets, right? The capital likes to concentrate. It doesn't really like to fragment. Like you
Agreed.
want better liquidity, you want better execution. That means you have like really one venue to do things on. Traditionally, the fragmentation happens when you have like regulatory barriers. So it's like I am regulated in the U.S. by the CFTC, and over there they're regulated by like MAS in Singapore. So obviously, you can't necessarily trade on the same venue, and the liquidity can't be the same. I think largely this capital fragmentation has happened in crypto as a result of like token incentives, because people want to use different platforms in order to like potentially accrue like token equity or whatever. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think where there is room for like sort of like friendly competition or a lack thereof is like when you bring up things like emerging markets. I think you want to show people in emerging markets a different thing than maybe you show the traditional like Web3 consumer who like wants to trade a meme coin, right? Like a overwhelmingly large portion of emerging markets portfolios are increasingly crypto assets because they got exposure to them pretty early on. Like if you bought Bitcoin or Ethereum in 2017, it's like a pretty nice nest egg at this point. So I think with those users, there will be probably a new class of L2s who look to at least from a user experience standpoint, sort of protect users and only show them like, okay, you can borrow against your capital here, you can pay for this, and just like a little bit more of a simplified interface. So I do think there are some niches that people can kind of expand into.
Hot take. I think I agree with what the world you describe. I just don't think we need a new L2 to do this. Essentially, we have built the tools today to build very cohesive UXs. And second hot take, so you don't need a new L2. You can do it on any chain that has good enough tools like account abstraction, passkey wallets, embedded wallets, like Face ID wallets, whatever. But hot take is everything should feel like a monolith. I think we were scammed by tribalism to fight modular versus monolith. I think everything should feel like a monolith, and at some point, if you have enough users, you need under the hood modularism or like modularity.
So from an infrastructure point of view, I 100% agree. Like I had a debate with a few people on Twitter. Love Twitter. That I said, infrastructure. We don't need more infrastructure because for the real problems that I personally would like to solve, I'm working on as well. For instance, banking the debank or bringing them on chain to give like a similar experience. The infrastructure today is enough. So, I was born and raised in the Netherlands, but my mom is from the Caribbean. My dad is from Pakistan. 100 million people debanked in Pakistan is the most volatile currency in the world today. But you go to the most rural areas, they'll have a smartphone. They'll have like an Android phone, right? They have access, let's say, to any L2. It doesn't need to be Scroll, any L2, and they could have their funds, let's say, on chain. There's actually on-ramp, off-ramp, like, mechanisms for them today. And then no more volatile currency. You have payment options. You have yield options. So this whole, concept of preserving your wealth is there. Very, very interesting. And so then the question becomes, what's the barrier to entry? Well, you can talk about UX and education and all that stuff. But I definitely think we don't need another L2, which is also why I'm very bearish. Hot take. I'm very bearish on I think this whole narrative of a lot of L2s popping up is gonna die down. Enterprise going on L2 is gonna die down. I think that interop is gonna be an app on the application layers where it's gonna live more, where enterprise is gonna more interact with different kind of L2s. So actually that becomes a unification layer on sort of to answer fragmented liquidity. But at the same time, if you ask me right now, if I had to bet on something, I come back to my initial point where I think that capital is going to concentrate one or a few L2s where most interaction will happen on an application layer with those, let's say, ecosystems. The question is, will they become so big? Then to that point, will they overtake Ethereum, yes or no?
I think if you want to hedge, just bet on ZK. Because whichever L2 wins, it will definitely need to use ZK systems to interop with whether it is the off-chain world, the on-chain world, or any type of world.
I agree. I'm extremely bullish on ZK. I think that one thing I love is that sort of almost like the ZK narrative died. It's good because I think, first of all, yesterday I was at the ZK Friends and I was telling people, 2014 ING, a Dutch bank, implementing ZK in their call centers. And they were like, wait, what? ZK existed back then? I was like, dude, ZK's been around for a minute. Crypto accelerated a lot of development, develop experience, a lot of research in ZK. But it's been around for a minute. And I think, ZK being the holy grail or the end game, 100% that's the case. What I like about being the narrative, almost it feels like it's died down, is that we can just focus on implementing ZK.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will say Succinct, I think does a good job of branding, because I had one of my BD guys being like, yo, Succinct coming out with a super fast thing. Do you know what's going on? No, but it's fast. It's okay, cool. That's the way I would love ZK to hit mainstream. It's ZK is cool, it's fast, it's gives security. So definitely, bullish on ZK.
I'm gonna step in a bit, and
Sure.
I think let's do a role play because we have three panelists from ZK space, and if rollups are all competing, there's a different class of rollups that operates on optimistic proofs. So if you were to play the devil's advocate, think in the shoes of an optimistic rollup, what trade-offs, what advantages do they have that probably the ZK rollups have to compete with, and also ZK rollups advantages? Do they actually translate, and how do they translate to the users and the applications on the rollup?
I guess when they started in 2022, 2023, it was a better go-to-market to not have proofs at all. and it was cheaper, it was faster, and no one cared. So if you are a startup, you think I want to deliver value as soon as possible. I want to be usable, and I will come up later with an idea on how to secure my funds. So it worked great, and I respect a lot of the teams for it. Like Arbitrum has a very fast block time, good UX, low prices, high TVL. And then when as ZK kind of the narratives dies out, but the good products of ZK kind of get modularized, they'll just take their pick. And we thought initially that it would be hard to convert existing optimistic rollups into ZK rollups. It's not.
I remember that. I remember that many notable people said, no, you can't do that. But just I think it's cool that it's happening. It's one of the things I love about crypto is that tech is really like at the forefront. Just to piggyback off of that, ZK does not need to be understood by the users or on application level. It's my hot take. No, it needs to exist. And I think that's why I'm glad that the ZK narrative, quote unquote, ZK narrative died, because when in 2023, all these launches was kind of like, a lot of like getting launch partners on, I won't name any names, but rollups at launch was kind of like, oh, we're there because it's ZK. Okay, why? And then you ask an app developer, why are you then building on ZK? Why is ZK? Because ZK is going to scale. How? Do you understand that it's going to be extremely expensive for you on day one?
Exactly.
Like it's like, what do you mean it's going to be expensive? I was like, and then all these L2s at launches, that like at some point they were more expensive than L1. I was like, do you know that? And it got quiet because they were like, fuck, should have launched an ARM.
Yeah, but I remember when I arrived in the Starknet ecosystem, many builders were there because they believed in ZK. Yeah, it was a Schelling point as well, like the dream of math. Like it was beautiful, and thanks to those people who believed in the dream and maybe paid more transaction costs than on Arbitrum, it exists. And if everyone had done the startup thing of going for the low transaction cost, you wouldn't have OpenVM, you wouldn't have Cairo VM, you wouldn't have ZK on Bitcoin. You'd have cheap like forks of Ethereum.
I think it level.
I was going to say, ZK on Bitcoin is actually a pretty good example of when optimistic rollups maybe start to make a little bit of sense for a little while at least. Like, and I'm kind of summarizing the same thing you guys said, but like you need to reach a critical threshold of compute before the amortization starts to like really take hold and make your per unit cost basis make sense, right? So you need to have a lot of velocity on the layer 2 in order for it to be reasonable to not use an optimistic rollup. Yes, there is some level of security degradation. I think in the Ethereum world, the care on that is like maybe a little bit lower than in the Bitcoin world, where they seem to care a lot. But in the Bitcoin world, they're a lot more desperate. So they're happy to take what they can get. But yeah, I mean, I think that for the most part, like it's just an economic question, right? Like if you don't have enough computation happening on the layer 2, and there's not enough like high velocity, you kind of got to use an optimistic rollup. I don't want to spend $100,000 for my swap.
There's a new second trade-off, which is finality in this multi-chain world.
Yeah, I love talking about finality. I just want to say one thing before. I do think ZK left a bad taste in a lot of like founders' mouths when they launched and they didn't know that. I think it wasn't communicated well enough. I think that the way the hype and the marketing worked when they launched was kind of like ZK the end game, ZK the holy grail.
Wait, like they didn't know about the amortization stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, but if they're the founder and they didn't know about that,
brother, I was at ECC 2023 and people were like, I remember there was one protocol that didn't launch a scroll, they went like to linear. Like, dude, why are the gas fees higher than L1?
But if you raised and you didn't know that, you should be ostracized from our society forever. That's
I don't know
pathetic.
about that. I think that's
so
a bit
bad.
too. That's too. I think that's. No, I
It's
don't
so
agree with
unserious.
that.
I mean, dude, imagine actually raising millions of dollars from VC and not knowing how the underlying technology
Brother,
that you work
it's not
with.
just the underlying tech is different than Web 2 where like I'll tell you something, it's the equivalent of leaving your cloud server on and having like a bill of 100K and you're like, shit, I didn't know how I need to like manage the load balancer and make sure I configure my servers well enough. You could also argue for that, being like, how stupid are you to like doing that? It's literally the same thing where it's like, how much do you expect people to understand? And I'll tell you this, at crypto, which is like we ride the hype wave too much.
Yeah.
And then what happened there? Like I hear what you're saying. I can see you can expect a level of competency in like you should have a certain level of competency, and that's there right now because you got burned so hard.
They're probably millionaires. Like, let's be honest. They probably dumb token.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe not. Like
That's sad.
my advisory shares are not looking great.
Yeah. But scroll on launch was extremely expensive.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and you know.
But people believe in the thing that because they go to like I don't know, they go to and say, yeah, why am I paying $2 per transaction? I left Ethereum because $8 per transaction is too much, but $2 is still too much. And he says, okay, but look, the roadmap, in 6 months it will be 10 cents. And in 6 more months it will be 1 cent. And maybe the airdrop compensates for the belief that you have in us, and we're building for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, yes, and I think that I am like Stark, where like I'm very proud of like what we did consecutively, like upgrading and getting there. I just think that like back in the day, if I would have been in charge, I would have done the go to market or launch. It's different because even like with Polygon, I saw it. I remember when I was part of Polygon back then. I looked at it, I was like, hey, it's fine to launch mainnet because there's just certain things you can only do and upgrade once you're on mainnet. But let's not do such a big of a launch, or like you need to keep it on the wraps and be like, and now you're competitive, because if you're like twice the cost of OP, which means like 1 cent swap versus 2 cent swap or 3 cent swap, I can sell that.
But not 10, 20, 100.
$1.50 for a swap, it's kind of like that does it. And also like, so I think that those are like some of the changes I would have. But again, I think that looking at the positive, very negatively speaking, what it killed is the ZK narrative, right? Being like, oh no, I'm not gonna. Right now, people are like, not touching ZK, brother.
But is this true? Because 2023 was expensive. 2024 it was not as much expensive. I feel like 2025, then ZK is everywhere. Like the roadmap of Ethereum has ZK. The roadmap of Solana has ZK. The front line of Celestia
The
has
roadmap of
ZK.
Bitcoin has ZK.
Yeah,
so
but
it's
it's
like-
there in the right way, which is kind of like abstracted away. The people that like
Yeah.
what you're saying right now, I mean, the majority of people wouldn't know that ZK is almost like even on like when the Beam chain was communicated, right? People were actually I classify myself as like normal people, as in like non-technical, right? As like identify as normal, non-technical, as in like I don't have gigabrains. But it was kind of like people asking like, oh, but does that mean they're gonna use ZK, right? It's like, yes, that's what they're gonna do. So I think ZK is implemented or inserted in the narrative in the right way, where it's like it's there for the good, but you like
I was just saying, I don't believe that people are saying, oh, I don't want to touch ZK anymore. Maybe they have a sour taste in their mouth. But today is so cheap. Like if you look at the Grow the Pie, which is a website where you can check the transaction costs. You cannot differentiate anymore really like ZK chains from non-ZK chains.
No, you can. No, that's not true.
Starknet is as expensive as our.
No.
Yes, look.
Yeah,
We're making up ground in the DA side, no?
Maybe.
I think the total expense you can still see it, and because again the space has matured, so protocol developers are looking at total expenses and total costs, and they are definitely seeing still a difference. It's also like mathematically impossible to be SG, because at the end of the day, ZK has an overhead, and you charge it or you subsidize it. That's like a choice. I do think, don't get me wrong, I do think we're getting to that stage where it's going to be negligible. Because at the end of the day, if you have enough users and if you have enough transactions, the cost of producing that ZK proof is negligible. It's at some point I'll pay for it, right? That's the stage we're definitely getting at, and I think that with ZK-ifying everything, so to say, we're getting to a stage where everything over ZK. Yeah.
I think just be conscious of time. I have a couple topics to go through. By the way, we're completely going off script. This is very organic. It's happening now. I'm glad we're having organic back and forth. But so assuming on a cost basis, in the near term, Optimus rollup and ZK rollup doesn't really differentiate there. Then you start competing on users, ecosystems, actual values,
Brand.
Then let's put ZK completely out of the picture. I'm interested in. So I think we're all interested in ecosystem incubation. What is sort of the unique approaches from your projects to do that?
So there are two things I'll share. One, 100% brand and ideology. It's like, what do you identify with? It's like, there's a reason you buy Nike shoes versus Adidas shoes. Brand. The second thing is going to be actually what you mentioned earlier, which is like regulatory barriers. So if you look right now, Coinbase and Base don't have UZT. This means that certain markets, much more difficult for them to penetrate because UZT has distribution and then dominance. So there's going to be USDT. Yeah. So there's just going to be that divide in the world where I think we're going to move towards having a few big players and then a lot of smaller ones that still pop up and have like very niche focuses. But that's going to be the differentiator, brand, and then I think, region/regulatory like dominance.
Is 2025 the year of M&A also? If you say that there will be
I
big
love it.
players.
Oh man, I love how you're saying it. So
I don't think so.
I don't think it's 2025, but not to talk about BD deals, but I've been talking to parties and I was like, hey guys, what if you just like quit and give me your shit?
Well, there's not the people to structure it on the teams. I think that's actually
What do you mean?
like the people that actually know how to like structure a merger and acquisition are
You
not.
believe
Like,
they won't come? If
No,
you
I
tell
just-
them that this 1 billion chain is ready to sell out?
I mean,
I don't think that's the bottleneck.
I don't know. I'd be very surprised.
Okay,
No.
prediction. Who believes here there'll be more than 10 big M&A operations in 2025 in crypto?
Lower.
5?
3. Let's say
3?
I'll go
Three.
1. I think there'll be 1.
1.
You guys want alpha?
Define big M&As. How do you quantify that?
100 mil valuation and up.
I think what's gonna happen first is that few will die,
Okay.
and then there will be and then there will be a few that are gonna die and due to too much pride to hang up to throw in the towel, but that will trigger people to open up to have the conversation. What I can tell you behind closed doors is that some of these L2s have been talking to merge, and I'll tell you now that it's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen 2025,
Okay.
but it's gonna happen 100%. Yeah.
Okay. For Kakarot, you asked about ecosystem building. Technically, we're now focusing on mostly B2B products, so proof providing. So most rollups. Our thesis is that ZK is going to be invisible to most users and invisible up to the DevOps. And the DevOps going to need good proof providing, and they're going to need diversity in the sourcing of their proofs. So what we're targeting is mostly L2s and L1s that require their blocks to be proven. So in that sense, the relationship that we would gather is with block producers.
Well, I think that, at least personally, I'm thinking from like kind of a first principle standpoint, right? Like we're obviously working with the Bitcoin ecosystem, and I think BTC represents like potential credit expansion. So it means that you have a lot more capital on the chain, right? But when you have a lot more capital on the chain, the question becomes like, you have your left side. What is the consumption, right? So I think a lot of the focus on Starknet at this point is like, what do users want to consume? Because we can all expand credit. Like in many senses, I think incentives are sort of like the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates to below zero, right? But if you drop interest rates to below zero, and there's nothing for people to do in the economy, there's nothing for people to like build, no houses for people to buy, and there's just not a lot of advantage to actually dropping the interest rates. So I think for us, it's really focusing on that like right side. Like, what do people want to buy?
Yeah, that's a good one. Like TVL of Bitcoin is like 0.4%, right?
Oh my God, it's crazy.
TVL.
It's
And TVL of
crazy.
Ethereum is almost 30%.
And in reality is like, this is some good alpha. You don't need crazy soft forks on Bitcoin to be able to unlock Bitcoin liquidity. You can really do it today. It's just a little like, there's things like discrete log contracts, which mean you can borrow, like you can keep your Bitcoin at L1, you can borrow cash to L2. They're really kind of complex and they're a little finicky, but like eventually they'll get there. There's stuff like BitVM, which will bridge like straight Bitcoin over. But yeah, like there will be a significant change in the utilization level of Bitcoin, I think, over the next couple of years.
I have a question for a Bitcoin person.
Yes.
So Bitcoin is trillions of dollars of valuation. There's 0.4% TVL, which means that even getting to 1 or 2% would be billions.
Yes.
Would overtake most of L2's TVLs. Okay.
Yes.
But today there's already wrap BTC, which has security assumptions that are okay-ish.
Yeah, not bad.
So why aren't
BitGo,
Bitcoin? Why are people just holding Bitcoin with absolutely no interest rate on it
Why are people
instead of wrapping to wrap BTC and being a LP in some pool?
Well, actually, it's a great question. I think generally speaking, like yield on Bitcoin is really low. So like the natural borrowers of Bitcoin are uncollateralized borrowers, so like market makers. They're very capital aware, and then the other one is actually miners, because if you borrow BTC and you buy an ASIC, it's non-linear their correlation, but it's a little bit more correlated than if you borrow cash. So traditionally, not like a lot of great borrowers there. I think where people have really not utilized their BTC is the like ability to borrow against it.
Yes, 100%.
Like you want to borrow cash against your Bitcoin, and then
Destinations.
you want to go do stuff like that. But I think that's like I think that's probably partially a marketing thing, right? Like in 2017, there were 47 million KYC Bitcoin users. That's freaking crazy, guys. So when you see a lot of this like Bitcoin maximalism on like Twitter and stuff, and the people yelling, that's like 1,000 people like who are holding hands that have known each other in their like little bunkers for many, many years. But it doesn't represent 47 million people, and it definitely doesn't represent what's probably closer to 150 million people at this point. So like I don't know the exact answer. It's very hard to paint a brush around like a community of that size. The community is massive, and a lot of them hold Ethereum too.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's a culture shift. I think that, typically speaking, BTC holders much more risk averse. Just leave it there. It will increase in value. That's where my yield comes from. And I think that is definitely talking to like BTC like whales or holders. Definitely, that's a culture shift, like a mentality shift that's happening. Destinations, like you said, borrowing against is like the fundamental principle how to get like the ball rolling. And I think the destinations for that it's going to be very important. And that needs trust. So it needs trust from both who want to borrow against it and who want to provide it as assets, as collateral. That's also, the ball is slowly rolling. I think that what's interesting talking about stablecoins, like earlier, I think being bullish on it, is stablecoins are transforming to become a wrapper for financial products and DeFi strategies. And so at the same time, they're becoming a wrapper that absorbs different types of collateral. Yeah. And Wrap BTC, I think, is going to have a great destination for some stablecoins in a sort of Ethena-like model.
and there's going to be other WBTCs.
Yeah.
We're at time, but one last question, a friendly one for the panelists today. I think something for the audience to take away from. So in 30 seconds each for you, pick one exciting development that's on the horizon for your project. What you want the audience to watch out for.
Actually, yeah, it's slightly adjacent, but it's something I think is really, really cool, and it's definitely sticking with the Bitcoin hat here. But like we have essentially done a ZK proven full node. So you essentially from Genesis to tip, you can prove the entire Bitcoin blockchain. So it makes initial block download of Bitcoin really, really fast and succinct. And it also makes it really valuable for like cross-chain messaging, right? Because I can now prove specifically a Bitcoin transaction and how it occurred. So I think from the standpoint of like providing value, that like it's called Shinigami. I think it's really, really interesting and pretty exciting. Like
Another manga name.
Yeah, of course.
Another manga name, right? Okay, cool. I'll take the next if you want. Kakarot, so I think our cool development for the year is to focus on proving the Ethereum protocol in real time. So proving Ethereum protocol means we're listening to new blocks being produced on Ethereum, proving them with zero knowledge proofs. And in real time, I think that's the exciting part. This is the frontier that has never been crossed yet in zero knowledge, is the ability to kind of stream or like reach that real-time order of magnitude. So today is like 1 minute, 2 minutes to prove a block. We want to go to below 10 seconds. And that's never been done, and I think if we do it this year, it will be our biggest achievement to date.
that was pretty cool. I said proving Bitcoin, you said proving Ethereum. That was good.
That mean where they can clap?
I guess ours is a little bit more of a boring one. We launched OpenVM framework. We've got our next gen virtual machine coming, Seno. And basically what that's going to unlock is quote unquote 10K TPS and sub-cent transaction, where the proven network was the biggest bottleneck, to keep up, let's say, with the sequencer. And so that will, for growth, unlock a lot of cool stuff being on a ZK chain, for the ecosystem to be able to do so. So we're launching a paper or an article on it soon. We actually already launched the OpenVM framework. And so, yeah, soon upgrading the chain to hyper optimize the chain without compromising security and keeping fast finality.
Nice. I love that. I loved how organic this panel is, actually. Questions starting from a single sort of standpoint, technical bottlenecks and so on and so forth, and then all of you diverge into sort of more holistic view of market positioning, trends in our ecosystem and so on. So I think this industry has really matured, and I think we're very bullish of this scale of blockchain, whether that's monolithic, whether there's a lot of M&A happening. I think we're more aware of the systematic constraints to scale a blockchain holistically. That's wonderful. Okay, it's the ZK panel. That's it for today. For a round of applause for the panelists.
Thank you, guys.